are the 5 DISC activities that I will present to you. Social network, which is one of my favorite ones. The superpowers and kryptonite. If you build it, now introducing, and then quick disc introduction, which is a really great icebreaker and it's a lot of fun and it gets people up, moving, and talking right away. We'll finish up with some questions and comments, and then Alicia will describe a couple of our upcoming events, and then she'll also send you a more full list. Okay. All right. And the first one that I'm going to talk about, and let me pull up, I've lost all of your beautiful faces. Okay. Social network. I have used this activity with intact teams. This is a really great activity for team building. It gets people talking. It's an activity that you can pull the thread through the entire time period that you have them. I've done this with all day like leadership workshops. And I've also done this where I've only had 4 hours. Okay. It really encourages the team members to get to know one another. And it also gives the power to the individual to share what they're comfortable sharing. Okay. The materials needed, you just need some cardstock paper or poster paper, virtual whiteboard. So if you're doing this virtually, I've also done this virtually. It looks a little bit differently because it's more talking and verbalizing it versus the actual drawing of the lines. But the instructions, and I've given you just a sample of what I usually pass out down there at the bottom. And it is getting to know somebody and then connecting with them over something that you share from what they've shared. Okay. So you'll have them plot their dot, and then you'll have them share 1 or 2 unique things about themselves. Hopefully something that most of the team or most of the group doesn't know about themselves. Okay. And then you have them fill this out throughout the workshop. Okay. So each element that you introduce to them, you'll have them go back to their social network card. Once that it's filled out, then I have them like attach it to the wall. And what I've done in the past is I've taken like butcher paper and I've taped it up on the wall. And if it's in person, then you can have them tape their social network cards all over the butcher paper board. And then what you want to encourage them to do is to take a marker and literally from their social network card, they're drawing lines to anybody and everybody that there's a connection with. Whether it's, oh my gosh, we share the same motivator, we share the same superpower, we share the same stressor, or I really want to get to know your fun facts. Like we had this one. You would not think that a 15-minute conversation would be generated over someone sharing that they have pet ducks, but it did indeed. Like, oh, you have ducks. I grew up with a duck, or my neighbor has a duck. I mean, it just generated this really fun conversation amongst this team because they did not know that one of their team members had pet ducks. But when you're done with this activity, having them take a step back and just see how everyone connects to one another outside of work or within the team is a really, really great visual. Okay. I've had folks that will take the entire butcher block paper and they've posted it somewhere in their office. When I've done this virtually, I will use a collaborative whiteboard. Jamboard used to be an amazing tool that we would use that was really easy to do. We have switched over to a couple of different whiteboards. Um, Alicia, and I apologize. I keep calling it Fig, but that's not the one that we use.
Padlet.
Padlet, thank you, is one that I use that is very simple. Okay. And they can draw the lines using the tools there, the virtual tools. Okay. Anybody have any questions about social network or has a different spin on it, has facilitated or participated in an activity that was similar that might bring a couple of different facets to this activity? Okay. If you try this, I love to hear feedback. This is what worked. This is what doesn't work. So feel free to if you try social network to let us know how it worked for you. Okay. All right. The next one, superpower and kryptonite. This is one that you can do very quickly, and it makes a really big impact. Okay. Um, I love this activity because one, it celebrates everybody's strengths. What are your superpowers, right? But it also helps self-awareness in that you can review your possible blind spots. Okay. And it really encourages exploration of your own self-awareness and that of other styles. Okay. And Lily, material wise, I've got materials needed up at the very top, and we'll share this slide deck as well. So any of these activities, you'll have the instructions, and then please don't hesitate to reach out if there's something that isn't as clear as you need it to be. Okay. The posters that I have copies of right down here, they are available as templates either in your facilitation kit or your practitioner experience. If you don't have either one of those, I have written these posters just on poster paper. Okay. You don't have to have the templates as long as you've got fairly big pieces of paper. Okay. And how this works is you'll pass out sticky notes to every table. Okay. You will instruct them on those sticky notes, at least one, or I'm sorry, at least two sticky notes for each style. You'll instruct them to think about working with each of the quadrants, including their own style. Okay, so at the end of this, they're going to have 8 sticky notes, at least 8 sticky notes. You're going to have them think about what it's like to work with D's, I's, S's, and C's, and what is the superpower that you really, really appreciate when you're working with them, and then what's your kryptonite when working with them? What zaps that energy? Okay. They're going to write it down on the sticky note. And then once those are done, once they have 8 sticky notes, at least 8 sticky notes, you'll have them get up and put them on the poster on the right column. Okay. Once everybody's done, then I always encourage folks to get up and take a look at all 4 of the posters. Okay. And I ask them to think about a few things. One, really look at the strengths because you may be working with folks that have superpowers that you may not be aware of. And as a team member, you might be able to tap into that superpower if that's something that you may not be as strong in, or you need that superpower to help you get through a project, okay, or meet a goal, okay? From an individual standpoint, if I am a strongly inclined SI, I like looking at that S poster because we all need that little extra vote of confidence. This is what people view as one of my superpowers, or these are my superpowers according to other people. So it's always just a nice confidence builder. And then on the other side, I always ask them, I want you to look at your style and the kryptonite or, what stresses other people out. Okay. Take a look at that because sometimes we're not aware that that's somebody else's kryptonite. Okay. Have them take some notes. And then when they get back to their table, encourage them to really take a look at the kryptonites and then pick one self-reflection. I probably do this, or people may perceive this, or this might be someone else's kryptonite, and have them think about how am I going to become more aware of that? How might I turn that kryptonite into a superpower? Okay. And then just do a table talk. Okay? If it's a small enough team or if it's an intact team, We've done the debrief where we're hearing from everybody, but if you're working with a larger team or you're working with like a cross department workshop, then go ahead and just have them debrief out into their tables. Okay. All right. Any questions on the superpower and kryptonite? This is a really great activity. It elicits a lot of conversations. Okay. And I will say a lot of those aha moments, like, oh, do I, do I, is my behavior, um, does it affect somebody else? Does my behavior affect somebody else in that manner? Okay. Because a lot of times, your intent doesn't match the perception sometimes. And so this activity, it brings it into a self-awareness. Okay. And you're hearing about that from the folks that are in that room. Yeah. All right. Any questions about superpower and kryptonite? Okay. I think, let's see, who was it that does the superpower and kryptonite? Have you had a chance to facilitate that? And anything that you'd like to add? Any aha moments? I've done it this way or this way?
I'm the one that said that I love it when you find people say like you have the same thing happen in
Mhm,
both columns. Like, because a D will say, well, I love when someone gets to the point, that's what works for me. But
mhm,
someone else will say, I hate bluntness, and that's what's difficult for me. So, that's a really rich conversation that you can have about how other people perceive, other styles perceive this,
mhm.
but someone who appreciates that, so it makes people understand the perspective of someone different.
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
that's just it's not about trying to put people in boxes or pigeonhole them. It's about having conversations and understanding people in different styles.
absolutely. And is it Jennifer?
Yes,
Jennifer?
it's Jennifer.
Okay. All right, Jennifer. Absolutely. And those conversations I think are so rich because somebody's superpower is someone else's kryptonite. And
Right.
it becomes, you know, uh, I always tell folks this isn't about changing who you are. It's about becoming aware of where your volume's set and where it
Yes.
needs to be set.
And I haven't ever called it superpower and kryptonite, and I'm going to forever now.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So I'm a little bit of a superhero nerd. So it
Yeah.
was, I just superpower and kryptonite, everybody knows Superman and
Yeah.
what that does. Like we all love Superman, but there's kryptonite there that depletes his energy. And we all have that. So, but yeah. So thank you for sharing, Jennifer.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Anybody else have any other experiences when they've either participated in an activity such as this or facilitated it?
They have a question, a clarifying question about it.
Yeah, Diane.
So we know there's the four styles, but like you're an SI. So when you do this activity, what do you have? Where would you, in other words, you know what I mean? Do you know, Desiree's understanding what I'm saying?
Yep, absolutely. And since it's from your point of view, right? So it's not necessarily
Okay.
I'm going to say that I'm an S and how I communicate. It's when you're thinking about how do you communicate or interact with those D's, I's, S's, or C's? What is,
Okay.
what is that superpower? What do you appreciate about them? And then,
Got it.
what drains your energy? So you could be so for S's and Alicia and I, when we were in the same office, we would do this to one another. So we're very um sometimes we don't like to make decisions. So it would be something as simple as what do you want to have for lunch today? Well, I don't know. What do you want to have for lunch today? Well, we had Mexican yesterday. Well, I know, but if you want to have Mexican, so does that drain some of our energy? Sometimes it did because there was nobody there that would, because we didn't want to step on each other's feelings. So even when we're working with folks within our same quadrant, it can be energy depleting, right? Or there could be some things about it that we need to be aware of, right? So yes, it does matter where you start from, but I really want them to look outward. And then when they're doing the gallery walk, okay?
Babe,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
how are you?
Hi, Desiree.
Hi, sorry I wasn't on mute. Hi, sorry about
Oh,
that.
no, that's okay. When they're doing the gallery walk, let's say you've got someone that's an SI style. I'm going to look at both, probably the S and the I. And look at the kryptonites. Are there things that I really need to be aware of that, it's not my intention, but obviously that might be the way that people are perceiving me. And then when you're doing the debrief and the self-reflection, just taking an inward look at yourself to say, ooh, do I come across as indecisive? That's not the intent is I might be gathering all of the information. So I'm not making a decision because I don't feel like I have all of the information, but the perception of that might be Tanya's being indecisive. Okay. So what can I do to help with that perception? Because that may not be the perception that I want people to perceive. Okay. Does that help, Diane? Okay. Any other questions or experiences that you guys want to share with Superpower and Kryptonite? Okay, you can have a lot of fun with this. And it gets people talking and it gives them those aha light bulb moments. Okay. All right. Next one. If you build it, okay. And I've started with a different version of this activity. And as I've kind of messed around and played with this is the most current iteration of if you build it. Okay. And one of the reasons that I do this activity, especially with intact teams or with a group of emerging leaders, those that may not have the experience of leadership, but are getting ready to or have just stepped into that role, we think about leadership and part of it is you're giving directions to people. So an activity like this, it helps them realize that sometimes what they have in their mind and how they communicate that is clear as mud to the rest of their team. Okay. So this activity encourages that self-awareness of how you communicate information. Okay. And then how do I need to flex to somebody to make sure that they're receiving directions so then they can move forward to whatever vision that we have. Okay. So materials needed, building materials, and this could be anything. It doesn't have to be anything um, expensive. I've used things from the Dollar Tree, the dollar store, Play-Doh, pipe cleaners, if you've got building blocks, tape, paper, the craft sticks, anything that you want to bring, and you'll put all of these materials. I've done it both ways, where I've split it up and put it on the tables themselves, or I've put it on a big table and I've allowed the leaders to come and pick the items that they want to use when they're building their structure. Okay. You'll need a little bit room to move. When you're announcing this activity, depending on how many folks that you have, you want teams of at least 3. The more the merrier, though, I will say. But you'll put your group into teams. And then once in that team, they'll self-select, okay, who wants to be the leader, who wants to be the manager, and who are going to be the team members. And each of those positions have very, very, very important goals. Okay. Once the teams are set, you are going to have the manager and the team members, the managers and the team members, you're all going to have them leave the room or leave the area. And you want to make sure that they can't see the leader or the team. Okay. You'll then give the leader these instructions. Okay. And you'll give them, 5 or 6 minutes to build their structure. Okay. You can take whatever you want, and I want you to build something. Okay. Doesn't matter what it is, use your creativity, but build something a little bit complex, and very creative. Okay. So once the leaders are done building that, you're going to call just the managers back in the room. Okay. Those managers have to look at that structure that the leader built. Okay. They're able to take a few notes. They can't draw the structure, but they can take some notes on what they think the structure, how it's built, what it looks like. Okay. They cannot ask any questions of the leader. Okay. So you'll give them about 2 to 3 minutes to do that. Okay. And then the leader takes a step back, or they can stay there, doesn't matter. And then you're going to call the team members back into the room. Okay. The goal here is the manager is going to verbally tell the team members how to rebuild that structure and make it as close as possible to the leader's vision. Okay. You're going to give them a set amount of time. The manager isn't going to be able to they'll be able to give them the instructions to begin with, but they cannot participate in the rebuild. All of it has to be verbal instructions. Team members can ask questions. The manager can ask those questions or answer those questions. The leader cannot participate in the rebuild. Okay, they can only watch. Okay. Once the time is up, then you do the debrief. What does it look like? Is it a rebuild? Does it look like the leader's structure? Have somebody just snap a picture on their phone of it if they want to, depending on how complex the structure is. Okay. Once you get done with the rebuild, okay, and then it's yes, that looks exactly like it, or no, it doesn't, then debrief that out. How was it giving instructions? What made it difficult? What would have worked better? What would you have liked the team members to ask? Team members, how would you have liked the manager to explain those instructions? Okay, what would have made the whole process better? Okay. This activity usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. And then when you debrief, it has taken, I usually plan for about 30 minutes. This is a lot of times the capstone activity, because when you think about leader, manager, team members, and those levels, a lot of times managers aren't able to ask questions about leaders' visions, right? They're just given, this is what we need. Here's our goals. We need to meet these goals. And so then it becomes that manager's goal to get their team members on the same, on the same road. How do we row this boat to get to the goal line? Okay. And then getting them to really think about, how am I communicating this to the team members? And how might I need to support different team members in a different way? Okay, so getting them to look at all of the different facets of management and leading a team to meet somebody else's vision. Okay. Brooke, do you aim to have diverse styles in each group, or do you set it up to show what it's like when styles are missing? You can set these groups up however you want to. I usually just number them off, or when I'm talking to my point of contact, is there anybody that could use some extra work time? Okay. But you can create the groups prior to stepping into that room, or you can let them create the groups on their own. Okay, that's a good question. Okay. But this is, again, this is a really fun activity building, the rebuilding, it gets folks really talking about that. And then the debrief conversation afterwards, I think can be real eye-opening to those that are, again, in those roles. And what do I need to think about? Self-reflection. Okay. I do like calling it extra work time. That's just a nicer way to say, we need to upskill you a little bit. All right. Any questions about if you build it? If you've got time to do this, I strongly suggest trying this, especially if you work with some emerging leaders. It is amazing when they think about, oh, this is harder than, this is harder than what I might have thought it was going to be. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments about that one? Okay. I am going to, we've got quick disc introduction. Anybody familiar with our quick disc card set? Okay. Our quick disc card set, it is available to purchase. You don't have to have the card set, but I do find that it makes it a little bit easier. Okay. What this is a great icebreaker. It encourages folks to get to talking in the language of everything disc. It starts to build some trust and self-awareness. Okay. What you'll do, and I've done a couple of different iterations of this activity. You can hand each participant 5 cards, and it doesn't matter what those 5 cards are, because what their goal is to build their hand, okay? And their hand is going to be used to describe themselves to their table group, or if you've got a small enough group, to the entire group. Okay? What you'll have them do when you have them flip over their 5 cards, they need to keep 3 cards that they best feel describe them. Okay. 1 card that does not, and 1 card that they are aware that they need to work on. Okay. And these cards have 1 word on them. Okay. So it's building the language of DISC. I think the card set itself is 125 cards, and each of the cards are color coded, and they are descriptor words for each of the 4 quadrants. Okay. So when they flip their hand over, the hand that they've been dealt, okay, they will be able to keep, discard, or trade cards with anybody in the room. Okay, it's a large group. You can keep them at their tables, but this is a really fun activity to get that energy up, to get them, kind of intermingling with the rest of the workshop or the rest of the attendees and participants. Okay. So you want to give them enough time to build their hand. And again, they just need 3 cards that they feel describe them, 1 card that does not, and 1 card that they know that they need to continue to work on. Okay. Once their hand is built, then you'll have them debrief out either at their table. Okay. So they'll show their hand of cards. These are my 3 descriptor words and why I chose those. This is the one that doesn't. Okay. And then this is the one that I know that I need to work on. Okay. And then they'll just go around the table or the room. Okay. Quick, fun activity to use as an icebreaker. Okay. Those quick discards, and I'll have Alicia send you a link to those so you can take a peek at them. Again, you don't necessarily need to buy the card set. You can create them on your own. Just use the descriptor words that you find in the Everything Disc profile. Okay. All right. Any questions about that really quick icebreaker? All right. So last activity, okay, and then we're going to learn about the sinking boat, okay, is now introducing. Right? This really strengthens the connection between existing team members. It can be used as an icebreaker to introduce new team members or brand new team or cross-departmental members. And it will help them practice their listening skills. Okay? All you need for this one is a writing utensil and some paper and a timer. You're going to let the group know that the purpose of the activity is to get enough information about their partner so they can introduce them to the rest of the group. Okay. They'll have 5 minutes to interview the other person. Okay. You, as the facilitator, you can create predetermined questions, and I have 5 here. Or you can just let them kind of free flow it, whichever you choose. Okay. When time is up, they'll switch roles. So you'll have them interview each other before you debrief out. Okay. But the whole goal is to have enough information, to gather enough information in that 5 minutes that you can introduce them and tell the rest of the group a little bit about their partner. Okay. And then when everyone has a chance to share, then debrief that out with the big group. How was that? Okay. Interviewing, finding out different information. Did you find out anything new about that other person? This is a little bit of a spin on tell me about yourself, which anybody who's been in any of my workshops or certifications know that I usually in module 1 with directing them back to their profile, and then I put them into groups and they get to share information about themselves that they're comfortable sharing. And this one is, I want somebody else to ask those questions to try to pull that out of that other person. Okay. So it's very similar, but a little bit different. Okay. This one usually takes about 10 or 15 minutes to conduct. And I think it gets, I hope that it gets people a little bit more comfortable by just asking questions of each other. Okay. Including questions about their style, what motivates you, what stresses you out. Okay. Superpowers and kryptonites. Okay. All right. Any questions about now introducing? Okay. All right. Well, these are the 5 activities that I use on a regular basis. A couple of them, as I've said, I try to build into most all of my workshops just because the results I've seen have been, really high. People like these activities. It gets them talking. I think somebody said, "Oh, yep, Kathy, any activity that I can keep people talking even in the room and then keep people talking when they leave that room and their time with me, I call that a win. And some of these activities, they'll generate those conversations even outside of that room. Okay. All right. Ms. Debbie, are you ready to teach us what the sinking boat activity is? And I'm going to hide my slide deck.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and it's an activity that we found online. I don't even know where we found it, but their colleague and I, we had 2 disc sessions kind of going on at the same time in different locations. So we decided to try it out. I did it one way, my colleague did it another way. So to the question that was asked earlier about, do you have to put them in disc styles? Not
Mhm.
necessarily. I think you can debrief a good debrief either way. I put them just randomly assigned. We only had a table of 8, so I kind of divided the table half this way on one team, half the other team. She did it by style, and it's just interesting that everybody approaches it a little differently depending on where they're coming from style wise. So basically, the gist of it is you kind of set up the scenario, right? So it's you and 3 other people are in this rowboat. Your boat springs a lake. You're in the middle of a very large lake and you can't see the shore. So you're kind of building this up, right? You go forward and you tell people what they have. So there's like 2 oars, there's a cooler full of food and drinks, and there's 1 life preserver. You also build on a little bit more information. So one of the 4 can swim really well. All the other 3 are poor swimmers. And you can see that your boat is kind of, taking on water and kind of sinking fast. So how would you go about solving that problem? And you give about 5 to 8 minutes for them to kind of discuss. And if you want to flip chart paper, you can have them either draw the pictures or write the steps that they would take in that given situation. But it's interesting to see how everybody responds. In my group, I had one D in one of the teams, and she's like, "Oh, I'm already the strong swimmer. I'm already on shore. They can figure it all out." Right. So
Oh,
you see those Ds, they kind of just they go and do their own thing, or they start just giving directions on what needs to be done. Sometimes the C's, they may not have the full solution because they're worried about making that mistake, or the S is trying to figure out like how can I help others, and how do we best use the supplies that we have. Everybody, it's interesting how it all comes out based on their style descriptors on how they do it. I had a C in one of my other, in the other group, where she was like, well, how big is the cooler? Is it a hard, is it a hard cooler, or is it one of those soft coolers where can I plug, the hole in the boat with the material from the cooler? So everybody kind of approached it differently. People had fun with it. Um, and it doesn't matter, how they get to the shore. I mean, it's basically that discussion around how did they communicate? How did they make those decisions?
mhm.
And how did they work together to do it? And then sometimes you get all of the creative things that you don't even think about, right? As you're facilitating, you get to hear all of the different perspectives, which then helps you build, the next one and the next one and the next one, because then you can kind of play with it a bit more. But it was interesting just to see how people approach that problem. So just a scenario type of situation based problem, that you could probably say, you're in the middle of the woods. You can say a lot of different things, right? You can build on those scenarios. We always try to, there's a lot of people here that have used disc. We've been in disc sessions a lot. So we try to customize and make sure that they have a different experience every time they go through it.
Mhm.
So we always mix up our activities, so that they're not replicating another session that we had. That was one that we both had success with, and it was kind of fun to see how it all came together.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Debbie. That does sound like fun. I can't even imagine some of the conversations that you got to listen to as they were, trying to figure out how do we get this boat to shore? How do we get to shore?
Right. And then some of the eyes were like, we just drink all the beer in the cooler, and kind of have fun. Right. It came from all different, but you could definitely pull out the characteristics of every style, even as they were. Sometimes it's not what you say. It's kind of like, how long do you take? And, like the sea, you could really tell was like calculating, well, how far from shore? How deep is the water? All of those types of things. It was fun.
Yeah. Oh no, I bet it was. I love those that, you get people talking and then, they have these grand, bold ideas sometimes and, it's just they're having fun with it, but they're also learning, right, about each of those styles.
Yeah.
Have you ever went one step further to ask, okay, so if this person, let's say the D that just jumped out of the boat and swam to shore, how did that make the others feel?
But we did. We talked about, how the others felt having to kind of fend for themselves, and knowing that they were the three poor swimmers, right? They kind of felt abandoned, that they didn't have any place to go. The other group that had the C in it, that was kind of, looking at all of the data, right? They were like, we're going to be, in the middle of the lake before we know it by the time we, take action. So sometimes like the fast pace, the more cautious, reflective, all of that kind of came to light. Um, it was fun to do. So we did, kind of explore how did that make the others feel, and so forth. So it all depends on how much time you have,
Sure.
to be able to really debrief it to the greatest extent.
So Diane had a question. Do they each know the other person's style during the activity? And did you have prompting questions for them to debrief, report out? So were there specific questions that you asked them, or was it more of just kind of a free flow?
It was a free flow for the prompting questions, but you could create. I mean, that was the first time we had done it, so you could create your own types of questions and have those prompts. We just had, being a smaller group, only 8 participants. It was a very just, and it was kind of our capstone of a 2-day event. So it was, they knew the styles, they knew each other. I didn't need to prompt hardly at all for that, but some groups may, right? So you may want to have some back pocket data questions that you have just in case, people are quiet or you hear crickets. But I mean, it's very easy. Some of the same things. How quickly did you make the decision? Did anything slow you down? Did someone overtake the conversation and other people weren't able to talk, or whatever it is, right? But yeah, hopefully that helps. But yeah, I didn't have to prompt very much at all.
Okay. All right. I love that activity because you can really take that conversation in a couple of different directions where you're building on their self-awareness. So, and
Right.
their flexing ability as well. So,
Yeah, and
okay.
like I said, you can get creative and create really anything. Like you're stuck on the common one is you're stuck on the island, right? What do you do?
Yeah.
You could do something in the woods. You could say, you have a party, and this is what's happening. So you can do a business related scenario if it's relevant to the team, and kind of create the environment, right? And then just how would they do it? And those people that might need extra work, you might want to put them in specific groups, especially
Oh,
if you're using that business specific kind of scenario. So there's so many different things you could do with it.
yes. Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing
Yeah,
that
you're welcome.
activity.
Yeah, you bet.
Anybody else have another activity that they'd like to share before we close out today's DISC activities webinar? Diane. Okay. Similar retreat, have done disc, and then they all go do an escape room and debrief those same types of things after they. Yes. And if you as a facilitator ever have the chance to go with the team to the escape room and watch them use what you've just spent time talking about, it is very, very interesting. And it is when you're talking about how do we keep this going afterwards, some of the observations and some of the debrief of just the escape rooms can be really, really enriching. So yes,
Yeah,
that is a very
because
fun.
they're timed and they have to get out of the room. It's like a physical thing. So all their natural stuff, is they're not as they're not as flexible probably. They're not flexing as much and they're raw because they're like, I gotta get out of here. So it's really fun to debrief after.
Yes. And something that's a physical activity like the escape room, they're timed. And so you're getting to see
Yes.
what those styles look like
Yes.
under stress.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times those behaviors are a little bit different than when you see them in just, okay, I've got a little bit of time. They're a little bit relaxed. Um, each style, when they're stressed, they do have some additional behaviors to think about. Okay. Oh, thank you, Debbie. We will copy that and then send that out along with the slide deck. Okay. Anybody else have anything to share? Okay, let's finish up here and then I think I get to give you a few minutes back in your day, which I always love doing. Um, there is a QR code here. So if you would like to leave us a review, that would be wonderful. We love that. And then there is also, I've got some QR codes for our Facebook page, our Instagram, and our LinkedIn. Alicia is very, very good about keeping everybody up to date through our social media avenues about new products, new classes, new workshops. And for those of you that have switched over and made the conversion over to Catalyst, there are some new things coming out. So if you haven't already, make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter. That is the first place that Alicia usually makes those announcements and updates. So you can stay up to date on the new products and the tools that Wiley has uploaded to Catalyst. Okay. All right. With that, I want to thank everybody for attending and your participation. I love being in front of